Chile. Officially, the Republic of Chile is a South American country occupying a long, narrow strip of land between the Andes to the east and the Pacific Ocean to the west. It borders Peru to the north, Bolivia to the northeast, Argentina to the east, and the Drake Passage in the far south. Chilean territory includes the Pacific islands of Juan Fernández, Salas y Gómez, Desventuradas, and Easter Island in Oceania. Chile also claims about 1,250,000 square kilometers of Antarctica, although all claims are suspended under the Antarctic Treaty. The arid Atacama Desert in northern Chile contains great mineral wealth, principally copper. The relatively small central area dominates in terms of population and agricultural resources, and is the cultural and political center from which Chile expanded in the late 19th century when it incorporated its northern and southern regions. Southern Chile is rich in forests and grazing lands, and features a string of volcanoes and lakes. The southern coast is a labyrinth of fjords, inlets, canals, twisting peninsulas, and islands. Spain conquered and colonized Chile in the mid-16th century, replacing Inca rule in northern and central Chile, but failing to conquer the independent Mapuche that inhabited south-central Chile. After declaring its independence from Spain in 1818, Chile emerged in the 1830s as a relatively stable authoritarian republic. In the 19th century, Chile saw significant economic and territorial growth, ending Mapuche resistance in the 1880s and gaining its current northern territory in the War of the Pacific after defeating Peru and Bolivia. In the 1960s and 1970s, the country experienced severe left-right political polarization and turmoil. This development culminated with the 1973 Chilean coup d'etat that overthrew Salvador Allen's democratically elected left-wing government and instituted a 16-year-long right-wing military dictatorship that left more than 3,000 people dead or missing. The regime, headed by Augusto Pinochet, ended in 1990 after it lost a referendum in 1988 and was succeeded by a center-left coalition which ruled through 4 presidencies until 2010. Chile is today one of South America's most stable and prosperous nations. It leads Latin American nations in rankings of human development, competitiveness, income per capita, globalization, state of peace, economic freedom, and low perception of corruption. It also ranks high regionally in sustainability of the state and democratic development. Chile is a founding member of the United Nations, the Union of South American Nations, and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. Etymology. There are various theories about the origin of the word Chile. According to 17th-century Spanish chronicler Diego de Rosales, the Incas called the valley of the Aconcagua Chile, by corruption of the name of a Picunge tribal chief called Tili, who ruled the area at the time of the Incan conquest in the 15th century. Another theory points to the similarity of the valley of the Aconcagua with that of the Casma Valley in Peru, where there was a town and valley named Chile. Other theories say Chile may derive its name from a Native American word meaning either ends of the earth or seagulls, from the Mapuche word Chile, which may mean where the land ends, or from the Quechua chiri, cold, or Chile, meaning either snow or the deepest point of the earth. Another origin attributed to Chile is the onomatopoeia chil-chil, the Mapuche imitation of the warble of a bird locally known as trial. The Spanish conquistadors heard about this name from the Incas, and the few survivors of Diego de Almagro's first Spanish expedition south from Peru in 1535–36 called themselves the Men of Chile. Ultimately, Almagro is credited with the universalization of the name Chile, after naming the Mapuche Valley as such. The older spelling, Chile, was in use in English until at least 19 1800 before switching over to Chile. History. Early history stone tool evidence indicates humans sporadically frequented the Monte Verde Valley area as long as 18,500 years ago. About 10,000 years ago, migrating Native Americans settled in fertile valleys and coastal areas of what is present-day Chile. Settlement sites from very early human habitation include Monte Verde, Cueva del Minadón and the Pali crater's lava tube. The Incas briefly extended their empire into what is now northern Chile, but the Mapuche successfully resisted many attempts by the Inca Empire to subjugate them. Despite the lack of state organization, they fought against the Sapa Inca Tupac Yupanqui and his army. The result of the bloody three-day confrontation known as the Battle of the Maule was that the Inca conquest of the territories of Chile ended at the Maule River. Spanish colonization in 1520. While attempting to circumnavigate the globe, Ferdinand Magellan discovered the Southern Passage, now named after him, the Strait of Magellan, thus becoming the first European to set foot on what is now Chile. The next Europeans to reach Chile were Diego de Almagro and his band of Spanish conquistadors, who came from Peru in 1535 seeking gold. The Spanish encountered various cultures that supported themselves principally through slash-and-burn agriculture and hunting. The conquest of Chile began in earnest in 1540 and was carried out by Pedro de Valdivia, one of Francisco Pizarro's lieutenants, who founded the city of Santiago on the 12th of February 1541. Although the Spanish did not find the extensive gold and silver they sought, they recognized the agricultural potential of Chile's Central Valley, and Chile became part of the Spanish Empire. Conquest took place gradually, and the Europeans suffered repeated setbacks. A massive Mapuche insurrection that began in 1553 resulted in Valdivia's death and the destruction of many of the colony's principal settlements. Subsequent major insurrections took place in 1598 and in 1655. Each time the Mapuche and other native groups revolted, the southern border of the colony was driven northward. The abolition of slavery by the Spanish crown in 1683 was done in recognition that enslaving the Mapuche intensified resistance rather than cowing them into submission. Despite royal prohibitions, relations remained strained from continual colonialist interference. Cut off to the north by desert, to the south by the Mapuche, to the east by the Andes Mountains, and to the west by the ocean, Chile became one of the most centralized, homogeneous colonies in Spanish America, serving as a sort of frontier garrison. The colony found itself with the mission of forestalling encroachment by both the Mapuche and Spain's European enemies, especially the British and the Dutch. Buccaneers and English adventurers menaced the colony in addition to the Mapuche, as was shown by Sir Francis Drake's 1578 raid on Valparaiso, the colony's principal port. Chile hosted one of the largest standing armies in the Americas, making it one of the most militarized of the Spanish possessions, as well as a drain on the treasury of the Viceroyalty of Peru. The first general census was conducted by the government of Agustín de Jauregui between 1777 and 1778. It indicated that the population consisted of 259,646 inhabitants, 73.5% of European descent, 7.9% mestizos, 8.6% indigenous peoples and 9.8% blacks. Francisco Hurtado, governor of the province of Chiloé, conducted a census in 1784 and found the population consisted of 26,703 inhabitants, 64.4% of which were whites and 33.5% of which were natives. The Diocese of Concepcion conducted a census in areas south of the Maule River in 1812, but did not include the indigenous population of the inhabitants of the province of Chiloé. The population is estimated at 210,567, 86.1% of which were Spanish or of European descent, 10% of which were indigenous and 3.7% of which were mestizos, blacks and mulattoes. Independence and nation-building. In 1808, Napoleon's enthronement of his brother Joseph as the Spanish king precipitated the drive by the colony for independence from Spain. A national junta in the name of Ferdinand, heir to the deposed king, was formed on the 18th of September 1810. The government junta of Chile proclaimed Chile an autonomous republic within the Spanish monarchy. After these events, a movement for total independence, under the command of José Miguel Carrera and his two brothers Juan José and Luis Carrera, soon gained a wider following. Spanish attempts to re-impose arbitrary rule during what was called the Reconquista led to a prolonged struggle, including infighting from Bernardo O'Higgins, who challenged Carrera's leadership. Intermittent warfare continued until 1817. With Carrera in prison in Argentina, O'Higgins and anti-Carrera cohort José de San Martin, hero of the Argentine War of Independence, led an army that crossed the Andes into Chile and defeated the Royalists. On the 12th of February 1818, Chile was proclaimed an independent republic. The political revolt brought little social change. However, a 19th-century Chilean society preserved the essence of the stratified colonial social structure, which was greatly influenced by family politics and the Roman Catholic Church. A strong presidency eventually emerged, but wealthy landowners remained powerful. Chile slowly started to expand its influence and to establish its borders. By the Antarctic Treaty, the archipelago of Chiloé was incorporated in 1826. The economy began to boom due to the discovery of silver ore in Chanarquillo, and the growing trade of the port of Valparaiso, which led to conflict over maritime supremacy in the Pacific with Peru. At the same time, attempts were made to strengthen sovereignty in southern Chile, intensifying penetration into Araucania and colonizing Clan Quihue with German immigrants in 1848. Through the founding of Fort Bulnes by the schooner anchored under the command of John Williams Wilson, the Magallanes region joined the country in 1843, while the Antofagasta area, at the time part of Bolivia, began to fill with people. Toward the end of the 19th century, the government in Santiago consolidated its position in the south by the occupation of Araucania. The boundary treaty of 1881 between Chile and Argentina confirmed Chilean sovereignty over the Strait of Magellan. As a result of the War of the Pacific with Peru and Bolivia, Chile expanded its territory northward by almost one-third, eliminating Bolivia's access to the Pacific, and acquired valuable nitrate deposits, the exploitation of which led to an era of national affluence. The 1891 Chilean Civil War brought about a redistribution of power between the president and Congress, and Chile established a parliamentary-style democracy. However, the Civil War had also been a contest between those who favored the development of local industries and powerful Chilean banking interests, particularly the House of Edwards, who had strong ties to foreign investors. Soon after, the country engaged in a vastly expensive naval arms race with Argentina that nearly led to a war. 20th century, the Chilean economy partially degenerated into a system protecting the interests of a ruling oligarchy. By the 1920s, the emerging middle and working classes were powerful enough to elect a reformist president, Arturo Alessandri, whose program was frustrated by conservative Congress. In the 1920s, Marxist groups with strong popular support arose. A military coup led by General Luis Altamirano in 1924 set off a period of political instability that lasted until 1932. Of the 10 governments that held power in that period, the longest-lasting was that of General Carlos Ibáñez del Campo, who briefly held power in 1925 and then again between 1927 and 1931 in what was a de facto dictatorship. By relinquishing power to a democratically elected successor, Ibáñez del Campo retained the respect of a large enough segment of the population to remain a viable politician for more than 30 years, in spite of the vague and shifting nature of his ideology. When constitutional rule was restored in 1932, a strong middle-class party, the Radicals, emerged. It became the key force in coalition governments for the next 20 years. During the period of radical party dominance, the state increased its role in the economy. In 1952, voters returned Ibáñez del Campo to office for another 6 years. Jorge Alessandri succeeded Ibáñez del Campo in 1958, bringing Chilean conservatism back into power democratically for another term. The 1964 presidential election of Christian Democrat Eduardo Frei Montalva by an absolute majority initiated a period of major reform. Under the slogan, "Revolution in Liberty," the Frei administration embarked on far-reaching social and economic programs, particularly in education, housing, and agrarian reform, including rural unionization of agricultural workers. By 1967, however, Frei encountered increasing opposition from leftists, who charged that his reforms were inadequate, and from conservatives, who found them excessive. At the end of his term, Frei had not fully achieved his party's ambitious goals. In the 1970 election, Senator Salvador Allende of the Socialist Party of Chile achieved a partial majority and a plurality of votes in a three-way contest, followed by candidates Radimiro Tomic for the Christian Democrat Party and Jorge Alessandri for the Conservative Party. Allende was not elected with an absolute majority, receiving fewer than 35% of votes. The Chilean Congress conducted a runoff vote between the leading candidates, Allende and former President Jorge Alessandri, in keeping with tradition, chose Allende by a vote of 153 to 35. Frei refused to form an alliance with Alessandri to oppose Allende, on the grounds that the Christian Democrats were a workers' party and could not make common cause with the right wing. An economic depression that began in 1972 was exacerbated by capital flight, plummeting private investment, and withdrawal of bank deposits in response to Allen's socialist program. Production fell and unemployment rose. Allende adopted measures including price freezes, wage increases, and tax reforms to increase consumer spending and redistribute income downward. Joint public-private public works projects helped reduce unemployment. Much of the banking sector was nationalized. Many enterprises within the copper, coal, iron, nitrate, and steel industries were expropriated, nationalized, or subjected to state intervention. Industrial output increased sharply and unemployment fell during the Allende administration's first year. Allen's program included advancement of workers' interests, replacing the judicial system with socialist legality, nationalization of banks and forcing others to bankruptcy, and strengthening popular militias, known as MIR, started under former President Frei. The Popular Unity Platform also called for nationalization of Chile's major copper mines in the form of a constitutional amendment. The measure was passed unanimously by Congress. As a result, the Richard Nixon administration organized and inserted secret operatives in Chile, in order to swiftly destabilize Allen's government. In addition, U.S. financial pressure restricted international economic credit to Chile. The economic problems were also exacerbated by Allen's public spending, which was financed mostly by printing money and poor credit ratings given by commercial banks. Simultaneously, opposition media, politicians, business guilds and other organizations helped to accelerate a campaign of domestic political and economical destabilization, some of which was backed by the United States. By early 1973, inflation was out of control. The crippled economy was further battered by prolonged and sometimes simultaneous strikes by physicians, teachers, students, truck owners, copper workers, and the small business class. On the 26th of May 1973, Chile's Supreme Court, which was opposed to Allen's government, unanimously denounced the Allende disruption of the legality of the nation. Although illegal under the Chilean constitution, the court supported and strengthened Pinochet's seizure of power. Pinochet-era military coup overthrew Allende on the 11th of September 1973. As the armed forces bombarded the presidential palace, Allende apparently committed suicide. After the coup, Henry Kissinger told U.S. President Richard Nixon that the United States had helped the coup. A military junta, led by General Augusto Pinochet Ugarte, took control of the country. The first years of the regime were marked by human rights violations. On October 1973, at least 72 people were murdered by the Caravan of Death. According to the Rettig Report and Valish Commission, at least 2,115 were killed, and at least 27,265 were tortured. In 2011, Chile recognized an additional 9,800 victims, bringing the total number of killed, tortured or imprisoned for political reasons to 40,018. At the National Stadium, filled with detainees, one of those tortured and killed was internationally known poet-singer Victor Jara. The stadium was renamed for Jara in 2003. A new constitution was approved by a controversial plebiscite on the 11th of September 1980, and General Pinochet became president of the Republic for an 8-year term. After Pinochet obtained rule of the country, several hundred committed Chilean revolutionaries joined the Sandinista army in Nicaragua, guerrilla forces in Argentina, training camps in Cuba, Eastern Europe and Northern Africa. In the late 1980s, largely as a result of events such as the 1982 economic collapse and mass civil resistance in 1983–88, the government gradually permitted greater freedom of assembly, speech, and association, to include trade union and political activity. The government launched market-oriented reforms with Hernán Bucci as Minister of Finance. Chile moved toward a free market economy that saw an increase in domestic and foreign private investment, although the copper industry and other important mineral resources were not opened for competition. In a plebiscite on 5 October 1988, Pinochet was denied a second 8-year term as president. Chileans elected a new president and the majority of members of a two-chamber Congress on 14 December 1989. Christian Democrat Patricio Aylwin, the candidate of a coalition of 17 political parties called the Concertation, received an absolute majority of votes. President Aylwin served from 1990 to 1994 in what was considered a transition period. In December 1993, Christian Democrat Eduardo Frei Ruiz Tagle, the son of previous President Eduardo Frei Montt, President Alva, led the concertation coalition to victory with an absolute majority of votes. 21st century Fray Ruiz Tagle was succeeded in 2000 by socialist Ricardo Lagos, who won the presidency in an unprecedented runoff election against Joaquin Lavín of the Rightist Alliance for Chile. In January 2006, Chileans elected the first female president, Michelle Bachelet of the Socialist Party, defeating Sebastián Piñera of the National Renewal Party, extending the concertation governance for another 4 years. In January 2010, Chileans elected Sebastián Piñera as the first rightist president in 20 years, defeating former President Eduardo Frei Ruiz Tagle of the concertation for a 4-year term succeeding Bachelet. Due to term limits, Sebastián Piñera did not stand for re-election in 2013, and his term expired in March 2014, resulting in Michelle Bachelet returning to office. On the 27th of February 2010, Chile was struck by an 8.8 megawatts earthquake, the fifth largest ever recorded at the time. More than 500 people died and over 1 million people lost their homes. The earthquake was also followed by multiple aftershocks. Initial damage estimates were in the range of $15–30 billion, around 10 to 15% of Chile's real gross domestic product. Chile achieved global recognition for the successful rescue of 33 trapped miners in 2010. On 5 August 2010, the access tunnel collapsed at the San Jose copper and gold mine in the Atacama Desert near Copiapó in northern Chile, trapping 33 men 700 meters below ground. A rescue effort organized by the Chilean government located the miners 17 days later. All 33 men were brought to the surface 2 months later on 13 October 2010 over a period of almost 24 hours, an effort that was carried on live television around the world.